Hello and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen, joined by Matt and Tim, the narcoleptic teacher Cox.
Narcolepsy.
Um,
That's a new one for me. Well, actually, it's not. It's an old
I was
friend.
going to say for you.
And a new accusation, a new characterization.
Yeah, probably one of the more accurate ones that I've given you.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about the basics of sleep tonight. We've talked about sleep a little bit in the past in the podcast. See some of Dr. Johnny's podcast. We talked about the brain, but we're going to be talking specifically about sleep cycles, circadian rhythm, how much sleep you need, how much sleep animals get, all of those interesting things. But before we do, I did want to give Tim a chance to explain why I said he was a narcoleptic teacher.
Oh,
Tim?
yeah. Oh, okay. So it's a fun story. You may have a story like this. If so, share in the comments below. I don't know if there are actually comments below, but I feel like that's something people say. So,
Okay.
so I'm a teacher, and for a long time I did not get enough sleep, and I was always tired, and I had to stay moving or I would be, falling asleep. And I remember one day it actually happened. I was so tired that as I was sitting on a desk at the front of class explaining an assignment to my students, and I actually fell asleep while I was talking to them. And it was the strangest sensation, just for a couple of seconds, just kind of nodded off and then snapped out of it. And it was very unusual. Anyways, so I don't know if you have had the experience of falling asleep while you were talking. If so, you know how weird it can be. But yes, so there you go. It can be done.
Didn't you say that you even remember, or someone told you the words that you were saying
No,
while
I
you were?
I remember, like, say it just as I kind of nodded off the I was talking. I was mid sentence, and my brain just produced some random words. I remember shoes was one of the words. Shoes had nothing to do with the assignment. Um, but yeah, so and I just, again, after like a couple of seconds, maybe not even that, I snapped out of it and just looked around, and the students were looking at me like, what? And then I just kept on going like nothing had happened, because that's what you do when you're a teacher.
Right. And middle school students don't know the difference between narcoleptic speech and normal speech. So,
I'm sure they were wondering, what did Mr. Cox just fall asleep right in front of us? But sometimes you just got to keep working on what you're doing and plow ahead.
okay. All right. And in the meantime, Dr. Johnny just joined us. So, Dr. Johnny can uh, shed additional light on sleep as we talk about it tonight, right?
What I remember, what I didn't sleep through in medical school.
Yeah.
Yes. Johnny has stories from both the scientific and anecdotal nature.
Mostly anecdotal.
Okay. All right. So I've got the material prepared here, and we're going to go through. We're going to start with our layman question of what is sleep. And I thought of course, layman way to start off is by looking it up in Wikipedia, because that's what the layman does. And it defines sleep as a state of reduced mental and physical activity in which consciousness is altered and sensory activity is inhibited to a certain extent.
I love how dictionaries can take something that's very natural and easily understood and make it sound really technical and complex.
Well, so the interesting thing about trying to define sleep is that different people sleep differently. That there's sleepwalking. There's a variety of different activities going on while you are asleep. So, what does sleep? Is it just a lack of consciousness? Like it kind of nods to the fact that generally, we've got consciousness is altered. So, for example, Tim can be semi-conscious, conscious of.
Semi-conscious. That means I really don't have a sense of right and wrong.
In that way, Tim is sleepwalking through life. No. Let's see. So anyway, just the sense that there is the layman definition of sleep is has something to do with consciousness and something to do with inactivity. And I think that's about as scientific as the layman wants to get, and the scientific definition of sleep is pretty close to that. Johnny, any insights before I move on?
No, I mean, you're probably going to get into this about like the brain waves and things like that. Are you
A
gonna
little
get
bit. I've got a
Okay.
little bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
We're keeping it
that's
at a
least-
layman level here. Wikipedia is good. Brain waves, I don't know.
That's right. That's out there. Hey, I'll share something that it's kind of just a fun reframing of the topic. Normally we think of, oh, sleep is that thing that we do, between days where we live our lives and we do our things, well, and then in between all that we go to sleep. And I'd heard it suggested somewhere, and it's just an interesting way to frame it, that perhaps we could think of it the other way and think of sleep is what we do, and just in between sleep we are awake so we can get our nutrients and take care of our needs and then go back to sleep. So how do you frame it?
And then when you have a dream, but then you have a dream within a dream, then the sleep feels longer or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. We needed to reference Inception here because that's a great movie.
It was always going to happen.
Yes. But no, in support of that theory, if you look at different creatures, they will have different sleep periods. So, for example, cats will sleep for a much longer period than humans, and their bodies have evolved that way, and that's how
Yeah,
they.
We're going to actually talk about other mammalian species at the end of the podcast and why they sleep more, or do they?
Or are they just lazy?
Well, in the case of cats, the answer would be yes. But
that's right.
Yeah, we all think we own cats, but they actually own us.
That's right. Another reframing that helps to explain things. Yes.
Okay. Before we go down a cat tangent.
Before this becomes a catastrophe, let's move on.
There we go.
Pun loading, not taking too long.
Darn okay. It. Okay, next question. Why do we sleep? So we have a definition kind of sleep. So why do we sleep? There's a number of different reasons. I've distilled a few from some articles I read. It says, first, a healthy amount of sleep is vital for brain plasticity, or the brain's ability to adapt to input. If we sleep too little, we become unable to process what we've learned during the day, and we have more trouble remembering it in the future. We'll talk about some of these specific studies here in later on in the podcast. It says researchers also believe that sleep may promote the removal of waste products from brain cells, something that seems to occur less efficiently when the brain is awake. So one of the purposes of sleep, why we sleep, is brain function and removing of brain toxins, refilling the glycogen or something like that, I think is what I read. That sound right, Johnny?
Sure, sounds great.
All right.
No, something that's
that
really
was your
important
medical opinion.
So we think sleep is really important for taking short-term memory and turning it into long-term memory, because your short-term memory is stored in a different part of your brain than your long-term memory. So sleep seems to be very important for that, which you're probably going to reference some of these studies that they did where they had different students sleep different amount of times. Is that one of the studies you're going to talk about?
I don't remember. I pulled from a bunch. That one doesn't sound too familiar. No.
They basically, there were two different classes with about the same students, and one of them they sleep deprived, and the other one got the preferred amount of sleep. And the ones that got the preferred amount of sleep did much better, like on the final exam and during the exams, than the other class. So it seems to be very important for that development of the long-term memory, and it's very vital. Like especially people that are trying to burn the candle at both ends in college and things like this. It probably isn't going to be that effective long term to do that, because all that stuff isn't going to be able to be turned into long-term memory, and it's just going to go. You're going to have to relearn it. Like, how many times have you learned the Krebs cycle at 2 a.m.?
I can count that on 0 fingers.
Yes, I do have some statistics about that, Johnny. We're going to come to that a little bit later. I don't have that specific study, but I have another one which shows pretty much the same thing, but some numbers to put to it specifically. And yeah, those are good points. Let me hit one or two more about why we sleep. As far as what I looked up, it says there are two main reasons that two main processes that regulate sleep: circadian rhythms and sleep drive. So circadian rhythms are controlled by a biological clock located in the brain. One key function of this clock is responding to light cues, ramping up production of the hormone melatonin at night and switching it off when it senses light. People with total blindness often have trouble sleeping because they are unable to detect and respond to these light cues.
Oh, wow.
So count that among things that I didn't know. It's a long list. But
another thing along the lines of that, a lot of people are very addicted to their screens, and it seems to really affect the teens and children when they are looking at these screens late at night. They're not able to get the melatonin cues because of the blue light that it produces. Actually is stimulating the brain, saying it's the middle of the day, and so their brain isn't being cued by melatonin to be able to go to sleep. So as a pediatrician, what we recommend is that there's no screens for like an hour or two before bed if children are having a hard time falling asleep. And that tends to solve 90% of the problems that kids have with sleep. It's just that blue light tricking your brain. You're not getting that melatonin release, so you're not able to fall asleep like you usually do.
Right. Yeah. So this light thing is a huge deal as far as, like I said, our current exposure to screens. So if you're on your phone and you put it down and immediately put your head on the pillow, you're probably going to struggle a little bit with sleep, right? Okay. The second process that we talked about that was listed in that said the sleep drive also plays a key role. Your body craves sleep, much like it hungers for food throughout the day. Your desire for sleep builds, and when it reaches a certain point, you need to sleep. A major difference between sleep and hunger: your body can't force you to eat when you're hungry, but when you're tired, it can put you to sleep, even if you're in a meeting, or as in Tim's case, teaching a class, or behind the wheel of a car, as Johnny knows. When you're exhausted, your body is even able to engage in micro sleep episodes of 1 or 2 seconds while your eyes are open or your mouth is open, right, Tim? Napping for more than 30 minutes later in the day can throw off your night's sleep by decreasing your body's sleep drive, which I think we all know anecdotally. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about the health part of sleep a little bit later. Let's move on to the next question. What happens when you're asleep? Johnny already gave us some insight as far as memory, how it plays a role in sleep plays a role in short-term and long-term memory. As far as some other things that happen during sleep, it says energy conservation and storage. During the day, cells throughout your body use stockpiled resources to keep doing their jobs while you're asleep. Your body uses less energy. That lets those cells resupply and stock up. Being less active makes it easier for your body to heal injuries and repair issues that happened while you were awake. And also why being sick makes you feel more tired and need more rest. And then, like Johnny said, brain maintenance. While you're asleep, your brain recognizes and catalogs memories and learned information. So those are all just different roles of things that are happening while you're asleep. It's a lot of biological recovery and brain processes. Anything to add? No? Okay.
No, I don't
Let's-
think so. That was very well said, Carl.
Yes.
This is one of my better researched podcasts recently. So I hope we, this one needs some kudos. Of course, Matt researched like 5 hours, no, it's more than that, of World War II content. So this kind of pales in comparison. But
Definitely
Oh.
worth it based on the amount of listens we got.
it was well over 1,000 people that listened to you for 6 hours, Matt. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Whatever.
It's more than have ever listened to me in my lessons.
And he's been a teacher for 30 years.
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm up to a couple dozen listens now.
Yeah. It's one a day, maybe.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that the layman has heard about, maybe not as familiar with, different stages of sleep, right? So we know that there's something called REM. You might be familiar with the idea that REM stands for random eye movement.
Rapid.
Possibly rapid.
I was close. It was on my notes, but it's further down below some of these other things. So
If
it's
only you
confusing.
spent another 4 hours researching.
Rapid eye movement. So rapid eye movement is REM, your REM cycle, and then the other stages of sleep, of which there are either 3 or 4. I saw both in the research I looked at, but most people seem to land on 3 stages of NREM, or not REM sleep. And so those cycles, those stages are as follows, from what I could glean. Stage 1 is the lightest stage of sleep. You enter stage 1 right after you fall asleep. The stage usually lasts only a few minutes, making up about 5% of your sleep time. So stage 2 is still light but deeper, obviously, moving down the sleep stage level. During the stage, your brain waves slow down. So like Johnny said, your brain activity, the brain waves slow down, and you have notable pauses between short, powerful bursts of electrical activity. Experts think those bursts are your brain organizing memories and information from the time you spent awake. So once again, what Johnny was telling us about, that's at least partially stage 2.
So can I just explain how they do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Might make sense a little bit more. Like those sci-fi movies where they put all like the little stickers on people's heads to read their brain waves. That's really what it's doing. Is it's measuring electrical activity between 2 points on your head, and so they can look at the electrical activity and try to figure out, like, is the brain making certain patterns? And they've noticed different types of patterns that are being made in different stages of sleep, which is how they came up with the stages of sleep. So when they put like all those little wires on the head, that's what they're measuring, is the electrical activity between one area to another.
That's really interesting, and it's useful also. Well, I have anecdotal experience with this. I don't know, obviously, what Johnny knows about it, but my daughter had a bunch of seizures, which also we've talked about in this podcast before. And so they had to do different EEGs on her, which are these brain tests. And they wanted her to come in sleep deprived. And so that she had to fall asleep while she was there. So we had to keep her up. It's not fun, especially the last time we took her in, she was 8. That's much easier to deal with than the first time. I think she may have been 5 when we took her in the first time, and that keeping a 5 20 hours out of 24 hours is not a party. And so anyway, they had to bring her in sleep deprived, and then they put all those little nodes things on her head, and then they wanted her to fall asleep, and they wanted to measure these brain waves. Like Johnny said, they can track these things. They have patterns for these things, and so if you have epilepsy, they can see certain patterns of epileptic individuals in these brain waves as they fall asleep. Even if you don't actually have a seizure, epilepsy presents itself in these brain waves. And so that was something they were able to tell from these EEGs. So, okay, Stage 3. Oh, no, I didn't finish with stage 2. Stage 2 apparently accounts for 45% of your time asleep, the most of any stage. And you go through multiple stages of these, of stage 2. It says each one is longer than the last. And then stage 3. Stage 3, your brain waves are slow but strong. Your body takes advantage of this very deep sleep stage to repair injuries and reinforce your immune system. The same bursts of brain activity that happen in stage 2 can also happen in stage 3, and brain waves specific to stage 3 help regulate those bursts. You need stage 3 to help wake up feeling rested. Without stage 3 sleep, you feel tired and drained even if you slept for a long time. That's why your body automatically tries to get as much stage 3 sleep into your sleeping period as early as possible. And then it says your body moves after stage 3, your body moves into stage 2, which is the gatekeeper for REM sleep. So stage 2 and REM sleep are interrelated. So now let's move on to what REM sleep is, which is, like I said, rapid eye movement. Sleep of this stage of sleep is where most dreams happen. Its name comes from how your eyes move behind your eyelids while you're dreaming, which, once again, I think anecdotally we've all seen before. Someone asleep, maybe your dog. During REM sleep, your brain activity looks very similar to brain activity while you're awake. It makes up about 25% of your total sleep time. And your first REM cycle of sleep is typically the shortest at around 10 minutes. And then it gets longer and longer as you are sleeping. So those are the different stages of sleep, which is, I think most people have like these smart watches that kind of measure the stages of sleep to some degree. Obviously, they're not to the granular level that Johnny was talking about with, measuring brain waves. But obviously, just based on the amount of movement that's happening in your body, you can kind of figure out what stage of sleep someone is in. So they're all important, but obviously REM sleep is the most important, I think, from what I read. Though stage 2 obviously very important as well. I don't know. Anyway, comments?
Yeah, so the stages of sleep are important, and they will increase and decrease in time as you sleep throughout the night. So basically, you fall into a really deep sleep, like a stage 3, and then after your rhythm, you'll come out of that deep sleep and be in like this REM and kind of like in a lighter sleep, and then you'll drop back down to deep sleep, and then you'll come out of it again, and then drop down into deep sleep, and then come out of it again. And every time you come out of it, you're a little bit more awake. And once you reach the point where your brain like goes to like a stage 1 sleep, that's kind of like the morning time where you start to wake up and you're still like maybe having these weird dreams and weird things might be happening, and maybe some people hallucinate. It's never happened to me, but then like you'll pop out of sleep. You won't be able, your brain is ready to be done, and you won't go back into that deep sleep again.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Here's a question for the committee.
Yeah, shoot. No, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, yeah. So, light sleepers and heavy sleepers. Like, I'm a heavy sleeper and my wife is a light sleeper. And I've always wondered, like, what causes that? Is it maybe that my sleep, I spend more time in like the deeper sleep, or, is there variation on the amount of time or how like deep we go, or does anyone even know why there's light sleep and heavy sleep?
It's probably related because your ancestors weren't worried about anything, and her ancestors, there were lions prowling around at night. So her ancestors had to be light sleepers, and the ones that were heavy sleepers were all dinner snacks. And no, I just
this is scientifically really accurate as much as I think we've ever done here.
I actually do have some information, and what Johnny was saying, well, not exactly what the research was showing, is kind of close. So I'll jump ahead a couple questions. This isn't the same question, Tim, but it's. I was looking up the question: do some people need more sleep than others? So may be related, like people that sleep more and or sleep heavier. And it, essentially what I was finding out, it says genes may play a significant role in how much sleep we need. So genetic factors are largely to blame for or account for those variations. So scientists have identified several genes involved with sleep and sleep disorders, including genes that control the excitability of neurons and clock genes such as, and then it names some genes, I don't know. Anyway, that influence our circadian rhythms. Just going to completely pass over that. And the timing of sleep. So genome-wide association studies have identified sites on various chromosomes. But yeah, essentially it comes down to the genetics do play a role in how we sleep and or how much we sleep. And so it says several genetic models, including the worm, fruit fly, and zebrafish, are helping scientists to identify molecular mechanisms and genetic variants involved in normal sleep and sleep disorders. So there's ongoing research into how to help people that have like restless leg syndrome, chronic insomnia, a variety of different things. Though insomnia to some degree is also socially and psychologically influenced as far as what's going on in your life.
Yeah, I think I heard once that women typically are lighter sleepers than men. And I don't know if this is just something that I heard from somebody, but like I think about it. And when we had like newborn babies, she would wake up 4 or 5 times at night to feed them. And I don't remember any of them. Like I don't remember the baby crying at all. And maybe it's just because I'm a
At least
bad
that's what you
dad.
told her.
It might have something to do with like, that's an important thing, important reason why a woman might not be like sleeping as deeply as a man because like she has the equipment to feed the baby. So I wonder if this will change over time as more fathers are doing that, waking in the middle of the night and feeding babies and things like that.
Yeah, an evolutionary change. Possible. I did, not the focus of my research for tonight's podcast, but a while ago I did read some research about the fact that women generally do need more sleep than men as a total amount, that the amount of sleep that women need, I'm going to misquote the study, but my understanding was something like half an hour or longer for women essentially got the same results that men got. So we are, I guess that would make us generally, us as in men, heavier sleepers, but I don't know.
Oh, you're saying because men might be getting less sleep overall and therefore more like
Potentially.
desperate
Yeah,
for sleep.
yeah, and that's actually one of the last things I'm going to talk about is, and that's comparing us with different mammalian species, why we sleep less, and so I think it might be related, but I don't know. That's a layman opinion, as most of the things that I say are. But when I'm reading the research, darn it, that's spot on. Okay, let's move on to another question here. Oh yeah, this one I know that a lot of people who listen to us are either in college or taking a class of some variety, and or maybe you're a world-class athlete, because I think it's likely that we have a lot of Olympians that listen to our podcast.
Yeah, let's wave to Michael Phelps.
Parenthetically, I actually met the most famous person in my life like a week and a half ago. I met Jason Lezak. Who, for most people, that probably
who?
What? Yeah, well, that's probably how most people would respond. Though most of you know who I'm talking about, you just probably don't remember his name. He was the anchor leg, which means the last person in the 4x100 freestyle relay. That's swimming relay in 2008. 2008, a big Olympic year for a certain Michael Phelps, in the relay that the Americans were supposed to lose to the French. He and were losing when Jason Lezak dove in, and he came back and eked out the win. That was his his probably biggest moment. He won a couple gold medals actually, but that is Jason Leasack, and I met him recently, which is he probably does not listen to the podcast. He didn't seem to recognize me. It was sad.
We'll have to invite him on.
Yeah, we're now on a first name basis, me and Jason.
JJ.
Okay. Jay?
JL.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Performance. What I'm talking about, what this was going towards is physical and mental performance related to sleep. And we've all wondered, if I don't get enough sleep before this final, is that really going to have a big impact on my, how well I do? So here is what I found in some of the research. Here it is. In the last century, scientists have tested this theory many times, finding out that sleep improves memory retention and recall by between 20 and 40%. 20 to 40%. That's significant. And then the research found that when participants are woken up during REM sleep, they could solve 15 to 35% more puzzles than they could when woken up from not REM sleep. So
no, that's
your
not
brain,
like in the middle of REM. That's like having been during, like having experienced REM during that sleep session, right?
no, literally woken up during, this is a sleep
Oh.
study where they woke them up in the middle of REM
Oh,
and immediately set them on some puzzles.
Mm.
And they were 15 to 35% better at those puzzles.
Huh.
Well,
So
I'm
your brain
sure
that's
all of us
super
have
active.
performed
is
when
to
we
be
know
interrupted
what's
in the
there.
middle of your dreams there.
Exactly.
I think all of us have, woken up when we know we're in like a really deep sleep. That's probably when we're coming out of that stage 3, and we're like, where am I? Like, what century is this? I just heard a noise, or you see a silhouette of your child staring at you, and you think you're like got stuck in some horror film. And you're like, I don't understand what's even going on now.
Yeah, I
But I
hate
think
when I
all
see
of us
my
have
kids
had
looking at me.
that happen before.
Yeah. So sometimes when you wake up out of REM sleep, you probably should go write down, if you're like an author, like maybe you actually should go really quick and write something down because you're going to be better. Anyway.
Now, and a quick note on that, isn't it true that the things that were in your dream, you forget them, right? Have you guys experienced that where you wake up and you had this real crazy dream, and if you like tell someone right away about it, you can remember it, but like if you wait a minute or two and then you go to try to remember it, you just can't remember it anymore. It's gone.
Right. Yep. I didn't do a lot of sleep research for this podcast because what? That's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say, I didn't do a lot of dream research. I didn't do a lot of dream research because I feel like that's like a different podcast. And anyway, but dreams of the things that I have read and looked at in the past, and some of the things I did come across tangentially related to this sleep podcast was that dreams, they are very ephemeral. They're here and then they're gone, and as actually most memories are, you have a better chance of remembering your dream if you go and lay down in your bed, like put yourself in the position that you were in when you had the dream, and you have a better chance of it coming back.
Oh, wow.
That's take that with a grain of salt because like I said, I didn't do a lot of research into it. That's just something I read from before.
And if this podcast, if you listen to it to go to sleep, you are great. You are wonderful. And you're going to have an excellent day tomorrow.
Yes.
ASMR now.
Does someone have some glass that they can rub against like sandpaper or something? Okay. Okay. let's see. There are a couple. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't finish. That's mental performance after sleep. Let's talk physical performance because it's also pretty astounding. A Stanford study of men's basketball players who extended their sleep to 10 hours. Who gets 10 hours of sleep? Whatever. 10 hours a night found several positive outcomes. The players ran faster in both half court and full court sprints. Their shooting improved by at least 9% for both free throws and 3-point shots. The athletes also reported improved physical and mental well-being. Okay, so some of these are hard to measure, but 9% better for free throws and 3-point shots. That's like the difference between like Steph Curry and someone that's like about to be out of the NBA. Like that's insane. So everyone apparently, if you should be sleeping 10 hours a night.
Yeah, get on that.
So no.
Right. Well, it
Unless
seems
you're
unlikely.
a professional basketball player, in which
Right.
case, why are you listening to this podcast to sleep?
And
Yes.
Maybe
aren't
they're
you
looking
coming?
for maybe they're looking for the next thing. They came here to find it.
This is the next thing.
Right.
There is so I have an anecdotal story about this. One
Yeah, sure.
time, in high school I pulled an all-nighter. Was up all night, and the next day went to a swim meet. And
That was smart.
it wasn't smart, but I was a teenager, like I said, and
Say no more.
swam the worst times that I've probably ever swam. In that swim meet. So I don't know. I don't know if that that's an N of 1, but it seemed pretty significant to me.
The next, Johnny, the next one I found, male and female swimmers who extend their sleep to 10 hours saw reaction times faster off blocks. Their turn times were improved, and it says kick strokes increased. I don't even know what that means. But time swimming a 15-meter sprint, kick strokes. Who calls that a kick stroke? Okay.
You get like a 7-stroke kick where you kick 7 times per stroke.
Yeah. Okay.
6.
So, yeah, it says their times improved. These athletes, anyway, and they had better mood. So yeah, generally it shows like what you're saying, Johnny, or at least the inverse of what you're saying. So more sleep helps, less sleep hurts. And then the last one, varsity tennis players, male and female, who increased their sleep to at least 9 hours a week. Nope, that must be a night typo. Performed better. The accuracy of the 9 hours a week. They got about 1.5 hours. Yeah. The accuracy of players' serves increased significantly from about 36% to 42%. So that's about a 6% increase in a serve accuracy. So it's a remarkable increase in athletic performance. So if you're in high school or college and or a professional athlete listening to us and looking for an edge, apparently what we really need to do is just sleep more, which is like the best answer. You don't need to train more, just go jump in bed for longer. Okay. For those wondering, though, we are going to wrap up the podcast. Most of you know how much sleep you should be getting and or is good for you, but we're going to talk a little bit about sleep recommendations right as we wrap up, just to underscore that. But okay, a couple more things to hit on here. So how much sleep do we need? During slow wave sleep, humans secrete bursts of growth hormone. All sleep, even during the day, is associated with the secretion of prolactin. Is that it, Johnny? Prolactin?
Yeah.
So apparently, well, like I said, we'll talk about the recommendations for how much to get, but in order to grow appropriately, you need the right amount of sleep, is what that sounded like to me from the research I was doing. Johnny?
Yeah. Growth hormone seems to be, regulated in that same cycle, which is important for growth, obviously.
Okay. So that's important. Let's talk briefly about naps. Naps are important to understand, and because whom among us does not like a nap? There are nap takers. Okay, fine. But let's talk a little bit about, because there is some conflicting science and opinion about naps. So this is what I found. Longer naps, especially those lasting an hour or more, have been linked with obesity and increased cardiovascular disease. So that's not good. Among regular nappers, those who snoozed for 30 minutes or less were 21% less likely to have elevated blood pressure compared to non-nappers. So there's the positive of napping. So if you're taking 30-minute or less naps, you probably have lower blood pressure. I don't know that study that I saw found a causal relationship, but there's a correlation there between power nappers and lower blood pressure. So those who napped for more than 30 minutes were more likely to have a higher body weight, like I said, and we're also 41% more likely to have high blood pressure. Yeah.
And
So,
I think when we talk about naps, we should probably talk about the elephant in the room, that the large majority of people listening to this podcast, if we're resorting to naps, it's likely because we aren't actually getting enough sleep. And as I understand it, isn't a lack of sleep a kind of an epidemic, at least in the Western world?
Yeah, I didn't look up statistics about, and I'm sure they exist, about the number of people that are going sleep deprived. But yeah, sleep deprivation is certainly an issue, and especially, like Johnny said, in the world where we are constantly on screens, we're kind of creating this horrible cycle for ourselves where it's hard to fall asleep, and then we don't get enough sleep because we have to wake up because we're busy, and then we are on our screens again. Anyway, so it's vicious. But yeah, the amount of napping, power naps. So essentially, for power naps can be a good thing. And so that's, I guess, the takeaway is like Tim said, your circadian rhythm is important to get on a good track. And that will help you generally health-wise. But the research does show that if you need a power nap in the middle of the day, 30 minutes or less can actually help you both health-wise and cognitively. So don't be afraid of a little power nap. But if you're getting habitually long naps, you probably want to take a look at what your your schedule is, work schedule. Some work schedules just kind of demand it, right, Johnny? Doctors, for example.
Yeah, I was switching back from nights to days like all the time, and that's really, really bad on your body. There's tons of research to support how terrible that is, but yet they still make doctors do it.
Well, we're
It's
not
vicious.
concerned about doctors' health as long as they're making everyone else's health better.
Right.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, if you work the night shift, we'll give you 50 more cents an hour. I don't know if your life is your life is probably worth more than 50 cents an hour. So think about it a little bit more if you're wanting
Right.
to work the night shift only.
Right, because it turns out that, and we'll talk about, well, let's hit it now, because there's a couple of things about, like, if you're just doing a night shift, let's say that you just adapt your lifestyle to work nights and sleep days, you're going to then be dealing with a couple other concerns. And one of them is, like, we already kind of touched on it, which is light sensitivity. Your body, your circadian rhythm, your sleep drive is biologically built into you to react to light by producing less melatonin. And so you are not built to sleep during the day. And so it's harder to get in that cycle, and your body is less likely to get deep sleep in that cycle. And the cycle where you're awake nights and sleeping days. On a related note, sleeping with your eyes open is something that's apparently far more common than I knew. It says about 20% of people do it, including babies. Yeah. So, but that's not like, not major pain type of like, we're not wide open eyes. We're talking, saggy eyes, but not all the way closed. Apparently, the condition's called nocturnal lagophthalmus. I did really well with that second word.
I think you made that up.
I wanted to go with lagomorph, but I know that's a bunny, so I don't think lagophthalmus. Is that it?
Ophthalmus.
Okay.
It's like ophthalmology.
Oh, okay. There you go. And it says in that case, you can usually close your eyes most of the way. You usually close your eyes most of the way when you sleep, but not completely. And so that affects the amount of light that's coming in to your brain. And when your brain just doesn't sleep and light are not supposed to mix, or don't mix super well for us humans. So
that being said, if you work the night shift, something that helped me is blackout curtains. And then also earplugs or like white noise to drown out the kids screaming at home.
yeah, exactly. Because that was the other thing I was going to hit on is sleep, and it's the same type of thing. I was doing research into what noises and how they affect your sleep rhythm, and I was looking all over the place. And the best answer I found was what appeared to be a doctor on Reddit, because the best source of information is of course Reddit. But
And
this
it's
sounded really
not
good.
A comment we will universally endorse here.
Okay, well it's not. It's generally not
It
the best
wasn't
source
on
of information.
Wikipedia, so we went to Reddit for our
Wasn't it?
source.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what are my options here? But it's the sound feeds into the brain's arousal pathways in the reticular activating system. It is a weak input. Vision is much stronger, but it is there. The sound inputs will activate reticular activating system neurons, which
I'm
will
sorry,
then turn
but
on the
this
brain.
all sounds exactly like what I would expect from a Reddit doctor.
Sending acetylcholine to the thalamus and activating the nucleus bacillus. I didn't think basilisks were even real. I thought that
That
was only
was
in Harry
spelled
Potter.
as well as I would expect from a Reddit doctor as well.
Bacillus.
Anyway,
Nucleus bacillus. I don't know what that is.
also
Basalis?
it's nucleus. but that's
Basalis.
fine.
Johnny got it. Whatever. To send whatever that chemical is to the cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex.
Yes.
And the thalamus is likely to be more important target, though. And anyway, so nighttime noise may also cause extra production of hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. And adrenaline, we know what that does. Obviously, it gets your body all worked up and fight and flight and all that. And cortisol is a stress hormone. So, like Johnny said, get you some white noise. We have some road noise next to our house, and so we have fans in our rooms. Works quite well. Okay, let's hit on the last couple of things here. Night owls versus early birds. So I've wondered whether or not these were actual, whether this is a learned behavior or this was a genetic thing. It says if you're an innate early bird, your circadian rhythm releases melatonin earlier than the norm, energizing you to become more active in the morning. Night owls, however, secrete melatonin much later, pushing peak activity and alertness later into the afternoon and evening. It didn't necessarily tell me whether or not it was an innate thing or a learned behavior, but it is a very real thing. Your body starts creating melatonin differently based on the circadian rhythm that you've created for yourself. Whether or not that's genetic or not, there does seem to be some genetic influence based on the reading I was doing. But once you've established the pattern, there's absolutely people that like to stay up late, and that's because melatonin doesn't kick in until later. So
there's a sleep disorder. It happens usually in teens where their circadian rhythm and their melatonin release happens so late that they just lay in bed until like 2-3 a.m. and then finally fall asleep, and then they have to get up early for school. So there are ways that you can move somebody's set sleep time back by like giving them low dose melatonin 30 minutes before they go to bed, and then like adjusting that time backwards by 15 minutes a day. It's kind of tedious, but it can be done, especially when it becomes so disordered that they're not able to function in their daily lives.
Okay. Interesting.
Good
Yeah,
to know
so
that
that's
there's hope.
yeah, I mean, part of this, I mean, Johnny's obviously a pediatrician. He's not a specialized sleep doctor, but doctors absolutely have a good understanding of a lot of what's going on to get you to
like
sleep.
he did some research on sleep, unlike, never mind.
Hey, right.
Sleepopedia.com.
Sleepopedia.
You didn't find that
anyway,
on Reddit, right?
There are there are doctors that specialize in this, and if you're having severe sleep issues, absolutely go see a specialist, because there are doctors that can help you regulate your sleep in a way that will help you health-wise, and obviously your social ability to interact with the world around you is largely dependent on the amount of sleep that you're able to get, and so it's certainly worthwhile getting to a doctor and having them figure out what way you can better go about your schedule. Okay, a couple more things here. Caffeine. We all know that caffeine is a stimulant, and so what effect does it have on sleep? So it says the release of adenosine. I should just not even try with these. A chemical byproduct of what was that, Matt?
Nothing.
Okay. A chemical byproduct of cellular energy consumption from cells in the basal forebrain and probably other regions supports your sleep drive. Caffeine counteracts sleepiness by blocking the actions of adenosine. Adenosine?
Adenosine.
That's what I said.
That's not what you. Yes.
Well, whatever. It's what I efforted. it. So yes, essentially, caffeine blocks the this chemical, and that chemical is what supports your sleep drive, and so you just won't feel sleepy. The toxins building up in your brain, all that kind of stuff, that's still happening. You just don't feel tired because your sleep drive is being counteracted by the caffeine, and so while you feel more awake, which can be good if, for example, you're driving or you generally need to stay awake for some specific reason. There are reasons to obviously use a caffeinated, beverage or whatever else, or a caffeine pill. However, be aware that the health benefits of sleep are not somehow magically imparted by whatever caffeinated substance you're taking in. So.
And one thing to remember about caffeine is it has a really long half-life, which means that it stays in your system for actually a very long period of time. So if you're having trouble sleeping and you're consuming anything caffeinated after noon, just try cutting it out and seeing if that helps.
Nice. Okay. Let's talk about how long you can go without sleep. Turns out this is, and I think I'd heard this before, but it's insane. 264 hours is like the record, the human recorded record. And this guy's name was Randy Gardner in the 60s. He was a high school student at the time, because of course he was. He had the longest time without sleep for a science project. This is a high school science project, and he went 11 days without sleep. He got an A, and then he died.
Sounds about right.
No, I mean 264 hours though. It is dangerous. Absolutely. It's based on one small number of studies in which participants stayed awake for more than 3 days. It appears that after 72 hours without sleep, a person may begin to slur their speech or walk unsteadily. Hallucinations become increasingly frequent and complex past this point. As people near 120 hours without sleep, they may experience a rapid and severe decline in mental health. This may involve symptoms of psychosis, where a person becomes detached from reality with complex delusions and violent behavior. So generally, not a good idea. I anecdotally, I participated in a race that actually, this is Johnny's fault to begin with.
That's not my fault you did it again, though.
That's true. And this wasn't the first time. This was like the second or the third time I did it. And this is an overnight. It's those of you that have ever heard of a Ragnar race. Ragnars are like relay running races that extend over a 24-hour period, more than 24 hours. and this is the triathlon equivalent of that race. And so I had just finished that, and I then had to drive for 3 hours. Not recommended. And I have never more distinctly known I was hallucinating than during that drive. And I absolutely pulled off the road and took a nap because I wasn't going to put other people in danger. But I was literally hearing voices. I mean, it was so trippy.
That was your
yeah,
passengers telling you to pull over and take a nap.
Carl, pull over.
Yeah. So be careful with your sleep deprivation studies. Yes. Okay. Last two things. We're going to talk about us versus other mammalian species and the long-term effects of bad sleep habits. So let's talk about these other mammals.
Ooh,
So-
can I talk about dolphins?
Oh
Shoot.
yeah, dolphins.
They're my favorite. So dolphins, obviously they can't be in like a deep sleep like we are, where we're in paralysis and stuff, because they have to come up to the surface and breathe. So dolphins will actually sleep half of their brain at a time. So they'll sleep their right hemisphere and use their left hemisphere to do the things that they need to do to live. And then they'll sleep like the left side while their right side is awake. And that's like how they sleep. Anyway, it's kind of cool.
That
No
would
That's
be
really
they're
cool.
so
a
messed up and
superpower.
violent.
Yeah, that's right.
They actually are, so don't look up pictures of that.
Yep.
Right. Yes. Dolphins. People love dolphins, though. We can't talk smack dolphins.
I can.
Smack talk
Freaking
dolphins.
dolphins.
Watch out, the
Oh.
dolphins will get you.
No, they won't.
Killer
Killer
whales.
dolphins.
Apex predators.
No, they
Right.
aren't.
Okay.
Sleep
Let's talk.
deprived.
Yes.
Anyway,
Sleep
back
deprived
to,
dolphins. That's
something.
yeah. Okay, research has shown that people in non-industrial societies, the closest thing to the kind of setting our species evolved in, average less than 7 hours a night. That's according to evolutionary anthropologist David Sampson at the University of Toronto. That's a surprising number when you consider our closest animal relatives. Humans sleep less than an ape, monkey, or lemur that scientists have studied. Chimps sleep around 9.5 hours out of every 24. Cotton-top pteromids sleep around 13. So essentially, these monkeys sleep more, and they're the closest, obviously, mammalian species to Homo sapiens. So it seems that humans have evolved to need less sleep.
You said
By
less
lot-
than 7 hours?
Yeah, I guess in non-industrial societies, it's showing that humans average less than 7 hours a night, which is crazy. It says REM sleep.
Probably terrible at basketball.
Yeah, we should go tell them. Okay, so it says humans sleep is 25% REM, but in primates it's less than 5%, and that's the main difference. Is that humans seem to have evolutionarily adapted to get more REM for the buck. So our sleep is just more efficient. And so it says that other primates dream similarly, but we spend a larger proportion of our night dreaming than they do. So thus the reason that humans can sleep less than most, I didn't necessarily check whether or not it's all mammalian species, but the vast majority of mammals sleep significantly more than humans, and that's because we sleep effectively. So, all right, last question that I did.
Wait, one more thing on mammals. So I learned this about elephant seals. They rigged elephant seals with monitoring equipment, and then they learned that when they go out to the open sea, like to eat, they'll be out there for weeks or whatever, and they sleep about 2 hours a day. So they're just dive, eat, and they'll sleep for like 2 hours a day for weeks. Then they come back on the land and they sleep more than 10 hours a day. But that's apparently they kind of go feast and famine.
Nice.
Maybe they're trying to
Been-
become doctors.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually Elephant Seal Medical School. That's right.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Long-term effects of bad sleep habits. So this is what you weren't looking forward to hearing about because there are a lot of humans with not great sleep habits. But the research shows that a chronic lack of sleep or getting poor quality sleep, so even if you're getting more sleep but it's low quality, increases the risks of high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression, and obesity. So that's a bad kettle of fish. And so what is so we've talked a little bit about bad sleep habits. Johnny's told us don't look at your phone before bed, get away from screens for an hour before bed. Um, obviously, minimize light and noise. So there are things you can do to make sure that you sleep soundly and well for however much sleep, however much time you have available in your schedule. Like I said, a lot of people aren't entirely masters of their own sleeping fate. So you have to maximize what you have in order to get the best health you can from what you have available to you. I think it is important, though, to recognize that if you're having issues with depression or things like that, do take a look at going to a sleep doctor, making sure that your sleep is not to blame for your psychological well-being, because that's a big factor as well. Exercise also is going to be a big factor in making sure that you're getting good quality sleep. If you're not exercising, your sleep isn't going to be as good.
Don't. With that being said, don't exercise like right before you go to bed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there are times, right. But some amount of exercise earlier in the day is going to help you sleep better at night. And then, so the last thing, how much sleep do you need? I mean, we all know the answer. It's like 7 to 9 hours mostly. I did see research, and obviously we just read that in non-industrial societies, 6 hours, whatever. 6 hours does appear to be scientifically enough. So if you're getting 6 hours a night, there doesn't seem to be a massive difference in the outcomes, either health-wise or mentally. But 7 to 9 is the recommendation for adults. And then obviously, if you're a world-class Olympian, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
24.
But yeah, so, like I said, 7 to 9 is great. If you can adjust your schedule to get it, get it. If you can't, make those 6 hours, and hopefully you can get 6 hours. Try to make sure you get 6 hours and make them super high efficiency. Maybe you'll be the first X-Men because you're.
One thing you can do if you're wondering, like, what can I do to get better sleep, and you want a little bit more reading material, is looking up something called sleep hygiene and trying to. There's so many lists out there of what you can do to try to make your sleep better. And then also, your sleep is going to be highly dependent upon your own cycle. So some people do only need some people might sleep 6 hours and feel great. Some people might not feel great when they get 9 hours and need 10. So it's like, do what your body is telling you to do. Don't be a slug, but get as much sleep as you need, and try to pay attention to how you're feeling when you're getting certain amounts of hours of sleep.
Absolutely. That almost sounds like good doctor advice. Yeah, like I said, 7 to 9 hours is like this rule of thumb, but like Johnny said, like Dr. Johnny said, your body, your genetics, there are a lot of things playing into how much sleep you need. So, figure that out. And if you having tough time figuring that out, talk to a doctor.
Not a Reddit one.
Yeah.
They're pretty good though. I mean, they are very convincing.
No.
Very
For the
convincing.
Search Reddit for MD sleep.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to sign off. Some of you might already be asleep, so you're welcome. And if
There you
not, we'll see you guys again next podcast. See ya.